I'm delighted to be with you here this morning and just to share my thoughts on how to create an impactful CV. This based, I suppose, on my experience of working with students over 28 years and based on the feedback from employers as well. Okay. So I'm having a little bit of an issue pressing on. Yeah, great. Okay, so as I said, when you're putting your CV together, it's important, I suppose, that you ask yourself, what's the purpose of your CV, the main sections to include it. And I'm also going to cover some general guidelines and a little bit on covering letters, because covering letters disappeared for a while, but they're back again for you. So when you are creating your CV, first you may need to start thinking about the skills you have and your abilities, okay? So review what you've been doing to date academically, in your interests and hobbies, and college-wise. Also think about what you have achieved and then what defines what skills contribute to these achievements. So you'll all have a set of skills and abilities that you can bring and add to your CV. So I often say to students, if you think of the purpose of a CV before you put pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard, you may think about how you'd put that together differently. So what is the purpose of your CV? And for a lot of students, I think it is to get themselves an interview, whether it's for further studies that you're doing an interview, or whether or a CV for an application for further studies or a job. Okay, so the purpose of your CV is to test if you can communicate the right level of detail in the right way. It is your employment sales brochure, so you're selling yourself and your set of skills that you have. It should outline your education and your experience to date, and then it should demonstrate a match between your skills and the skills required for the job you're applying for. So a lot of us in the past, or still do, we have a CV, someone's checked it for it, we feel it's okay, and we just send it out. But what you need to do again is to go back, look at the job description, look at what they're looking for, make sure your CV is up to date, and also make sure your CV is suitable for that role. So if they've mentioned particular skills, if you have them, make sure they're written in your CV. As I say to students, if it's not written down on your CV, an employer can't assume. Or sometimes students say to me, well, look, I wouldn't have applied for the job if I didn't have the experience or the skills. Okay, so an effective CV and a good CV will increase your chances of getting an interview, but not always the job. But the flip side of that is an ineffective CV has the potential to ensure you don't get an interview at all. So employers are very, very busy, and they're looking at the job description, they're looking at your CV, and they're seeing, is there a match? And if there isn't a match, you won't get an interview. I know for a lot of us, when we're putting our CV together, we spend a lot of time thinking about it, preparing it, organizing it, maybe getting it checked as well with a careers advisor or coach. But for an employer, they are used to seeing CVs, they're scanning them on a regular basis. So how long do you think they spend reviewing your CV before they send it? And it's down to seconds. And you might feel that's not an awful lot, but an experienced recruiter, when they know the job spec they're looking for, they know what they want, they're going to look at your CV, and if it isn't in your CV, you don't get selected. So it's for the amount of time you spent in your CV, and employers will review it so quickly. So again, remember the employer should, and hopefully they will, define the job and the role, so they're telling you what they're looking for, and that can be found in the job description and the job spec. Then identify the key skills and attributes for the job. So it's not a big secret. They're telling you what they're looking for, and it's in the job spec. So again, sometimes we can be guilty of, you scan the job spec quickly, look at your CV and send it off. But again, give it a bit of time, because an employer will shortlist your CV looking for a match between the candidate and the job spec. So remember, the clue to what you should put in your CV will be given in the advert. So again, it's simple, but again, a lot of us forget to do that. So 3 simple rules when it comes to your CV. Make sure it's simple, clear, and short. Customize your CV for every position you're going to. Again, I'm like a broken record, but use the job spec. Go back and look at what they're looking for. But don't kind of copy and paste what they're saying either. So put it in your own words. If they mention particular skills and attributes that you have, if you have them, put them in or highlight them on your CV. So a lot of employers, or you may hear it as well yourself, talk about targeting your CV. What does that mean? A successful CV is targeted at the job spec. So you're looking at your CV, you're looking at the job spec criteria, and then you're writing and adjusting it in turn to match that. So these criteria will be found in the job spec. So what they're looking for, they're telling you. And also, I suppose, the type of person they're looking for as well. Job descriptions are frequently divided into what you see as essential criteria for the role and desirable requirements. So the desirable requirements can be used to narrow down the candidates when there are a large number of quality applicants. So when you look at the job description, if you see that you have all the essential that they're looking for you to do the job, make sure you write down and highlight in your CV the essential skills they're looking for. And then the desirable, you don't necessarily have to have them, obviously, by the meaning of desirable, but that can often help, as I say, narrow down the candidates. You need to find out what the job involves and then think about how you meet these requirements as well. Because often what happens is you may have not related work experience, but you may have the skills and the transferable skills required for that job. So make sure you highlight the skills as well. So for an employer, they see it as a matching process. Okay, they look at your CV, they look at the job spec, and they see, is there a match? Also, a targeted CV will highlight the evidence an employer is looking for, whereas a generic CV, one that you've had, that you've just sent, press the button and send, I have a CV, it was checked, and you're not targeting it, it won't maybe get the results you wanted to get. So again, a checklist for accuracy and presentation of your CV. So again, for myself or anybody who's reviewing CVs, over time you see the same mistakes again. So ideally, I would encourage you to have your CV 2 pages. If it goes on to the 3rd page, ask yourself, why is it going on to the 3rd space as well? So sometimes if you're going out on work placement and you're giving a little bit more detail about your subjects per year that sometimes employers look for, it can expand. But look at what you have and say, does it need to go on to the 3rd page? If it's going on to a 3rd page, you know, maybe look at the layout. Check your punctuation, your grammar and spelling. Check the consistency fonts. Often what happens as well, people copy and paste information and then the font styles and sizes have changed. And again, you know, don't save it in a PDF until you've actually just checked it. Experiment with the layout. Sometimes I get a CV and there's very large and deep footers and headers. So keep an eye on those as well. Make sure you proofread it. Don't have gaps in your history. So if you're unemployed for a time, if you're unwell for a time, you know, just account for that time, you know, took a year out, traveled, you know, took a year out, was caring for an elderly relative or parent. So again, maybe ask somebody for a little bit of advice how you put that down, because gaps in your CV can always maybe cause questions for a potential employer when they're reviewing your CV. It is your CV, but again, when you're writing it yourself, try and avoid using I the whole time. Think of the reader. So you can use action words and that helps you avoid using I the whole time. Because for the reader, they're reading lots of CVs. So having I did this, I did that is hard going. Again, there's no need for a covering sheet or binding. So your CV is, you know, you start off with your CV straight away on the 1st page with your details. Again, a lot of CVs that come into me, it's the attachment is my CV, my CV. So always save your CV using your name. Avoid using tables if possible as well, because tables can take up a lot of space. Okay. I would encourage you to bold your headings, not underline. Again, I think of the reader, and certainly don't bold and underline. Try and use bullet points, which saves you having long sentences as well. And the action words will always help you to avoid using I. Organized, planned, initiated. So again, look at the action words that they're looking for that might be in the job advert as well. No photographs are needed, because again, that can cause unconscious bias. Some of us take a great photograph, some of us don't. So again, no photographs on your CVs. It really should be black and white. You don't need color, because again, you don't know how that comes across to somebody who may print out your CV as well. So black and white is perfect. I'd encourage you to avoid using fancy templates. Word works very well, just a simple Word document. So just to give you kind of a simple layout of a CV, and as employers have said to us, and I suppose I've based this CV template on the feedback from employers. So right across your page, because that saves space as well, so your name, your address, and again, whether you put in your address anymore is optional. Your telephone number, a mobile number, your email address, make sure the email address is a professional one, and it's your LinkedIn. Also encourage you, if you are putting your telephone number in, that maybe you have, if someone rings it, it has a message that to leave their number, that because a lot of people, with all that's happening with telephone calls and that, if they don't recognize the number, they may not answer it. Okay, so that can be a little bit frustrating then for employers as well. So leave a message and have a message answering facility on your phone as well. So because you're probably in college at this stage and still in college, you start with your education. So if you're still studying, you start with your education, not your work, and you work back. So it's chronological order. So third level goes first, the date of when you started your course, name and give the full title of your college, full title of your course as well. And then give them a variety of the subjects that you've covered. So educate the employer. Don't assume they'll know what your course is. So target and hit the main subjects or modules that you're doing. Okay. If you've done any projects, dissertation, site visits, anything that can enhance your CV and I suppose support the role you're going for. You could be in the built environment, you might have site visit, you may be doing, and a lot of the companies now are very good at maybe sending out assessment center or tasks to do to encourage you maybe to join that company, but you may have done those for other organizations. So any projects that are academically based or employer based, put them in the same for site visits. So the title of it and 1 to 2 lines explaining it. Because sometimes if you don't have a lot of experience in that area, you can pull from the experience of doing a project. A project also might be a group project. It might be a project that involves an employer as well. So title of the project and 1 or 2 lines explaining it as well. Then you're putting down your leave insert. And I suppose depending on the sector you're applying for, accountancy firms will like to see, I suppose, your grades in different areas. So again, write them across the page, give your overall points. Again, if they're looking for maybe your maths, your English or science subjects, but write them across the page and give the grade. Also, for some people, their leave insert didn't reflect their academic qualification. And once they've got to college, they've done very well. So maybe an employer in an interview might say, look, you seem to be getting on very well in college with your grades. What would have happened in 6th class? And you might have said in secondary, look, it just wasn't a great year for you. So again, you're coming down to your work experience. Again, you're starting now and work back. Any volunteering, any paid or unpaid experience as well can come down here if you don't have work experience that is paid. So again, the name of the organization, maybe the location, was it the next office, the next shop in Cork, Waterford, Dublin? What was the position or role? So choose whichever heading suits you better. What role did you have in that organization? What position and the date? So again, you're starting now and working back. So then focus on your responsibilities and skills. Say what you did. What did you do as part of that role? And again, they're usually action words: organized, planned, initiated. And then, which is good to start doing, is what skills did I gain from that role? When I worked in Tesco's, my attention to detail increased, my organization skills, my working under pressure, meeting deadlines. So again, every position or volunteering you've done, you have gained a skill from it, and don't kind of forget to put those down and think about them. So again, that's your work experience. As I said earlier on, if you don't, or if you're misfortunate enough or lucky enough to get work experience, if you've done any volunteering, because employers will wonder, what have you done during your time? Okay. Again, your computer skills, if there's operating packages, program languages you have, your hardware, your software, if you've taught yourself a particular computer package of that, put it down. Any languages other than your mother tongue. So if you speak English, it's your first language, you don't need to put down English, but you might have Leave Insert, Spanish, German, French, or Junior Cert, or you might be teaching yourself the language as well. So mention that one. Your interests and hobbies always, I suppose, give an idea of you as an individual as well. So think about the interests and hobbies that you have. And I suppose socializing with friends, spending time on social media is not what an employer is trying to get at here. It's you as an individual. And then maybe organize these under particular headings, your interests, your achievements, whether they're sporting, community, culture. And again, I suppose vary them a little bit and think of what you're writing down and how maybe that can be interpreted as well. And maybe put them into a sentence. Referees always ask permission, and or if you can't get the permission, it's perfectly okay to say references are available on request. So again, I suppose when you're in third level, I'd encourage you maybe to get one of your third level lecturers, and maybe then not to put in the principal or a lecturer or teacher that you had in second level. Then you can put in maybe an employer that you worked for. If you know that the employer no longer works there, think of maybe somebody else that you might have volunteered with. Or again, if you're struggling, or say if that company's gone out of business, you know, there's no harm kind of saying, look, available on request, and you can have a think about it. What I have here then is a list of action words to put into your CV. So you can think about, you know, instead of writing I the whole word all the way through your CV, this will help you with it. And there's a few more here as well to go through. So what I've highlighted here, I suppose, some common questions asked, you know, the students ask me as a careers practitioner, should I include the following in my CV? A personal profile. Again, if you are including one, you can, it's optional, but ask yourself, if I'm putting in one, what is it saying about me? It should be a short synopsis of your qualification, your experience to date, your core skills that are related to that job or your qualities, and maybe your career direction. It does need to be tailored to demonstrate your relevance to the organization and the position you're applying for. Because sometimes when I see them, you know that the student hasn't written this, they've copied it from somebody else. So again, if you find you're not confident writing that, don't put it in. It is optional, okay? And if you are putting it in, think about it and what will it say to an employer. Things like your date of birth, your marital status, and your nationality are not necessary under the equality legislation, unless maybe they could be involved and needed, obviously, for a visa implications. So again, they don't need that. Again, students say to me, look, do I need to put in my final year project or college projects? If I'm putting them in, how do I write them? So I've just given you an example. You would put in the title of your dissertation, your final or a large project that you worked with. And then again, using action words, what you did as part of it. I undertook research. I designed, distributed, and analyzed quantitative questionnaires. I analyzed the findings and then concluded that the following. Because when you go out in industry, for all of us, you're probably going to be working on projects, writing reports. So they want to know, you know, how you're going to speak about that. What's your knowledge of it? How can you write that down as well? And then with your college projects that I touched on a little bit earlier on, was usually it's the title, 2 to 3 lines. Did you do it on your own? Was there employers involved in it? Was it what technology used? What went well? What would you do differently as well? And once you're thinking about this for your CV, then when it comes to kind of the interview, you've already thought about it because you've written it down and you can kind of refresh and look over what was on your CV. So some basic principles to remember: relevance, research the sector, the employer, and the job description. Look at the order of your CV as well. Put the most important information first and give it the most space. Because sometimes people have a lot of sporting awards and challenges, and that's taking up maybe too much space, and then they're reducing another area that's more important. Look at the format. Make sure it's easy to read. Usually use 2 sides of an A4 page, or, you know, so it's 2 pages of an A4. Attention to detail. Check your spelling, your grammar. Be aware of cut and paste. Again, I see that on a lot of CVs. And also then make sure you include an effective cover letter. So common mistakes that I see myself and employers give us feedback: spelling mistakes, too much and then too little information, irrelevant details, and there's no personality. Like no one can maybe get a real feel for you through it. Poor presentation, dull vocabulary. You're kind of using the same words for every job description. It's too general. It's not targeted. So start with a clear understanding of what the sector is involved and what they're looking for. So go back to the job spec. Ensure your CV is targeted towards that job spec and it's relevant. Again, use the best examples you've got as well. And then review, ask yourself, so what? So when you're going through your CV and something's written, it's like, what's the relevant of it? So what that's here? Is it important? Also then ask others for feedback, because first impressions, when someone first gets your CV, that forms an impression. Don't lie in your CV because employers will check, okay? The other thing to say, and I've noticed this over the last few years, the students are writing a covering letter and it becomes the first page of their CV. Your CV is a separate document. Your covering letter is a separate document. So the covering letter is not the first page of your CV. It should be saved separately and it should be named Angela Collins covering letter, Angela Collins CV, and attach them. Again, it is worthwhile spending time when you're writing and creating an individual cover letter. In that covering letter, emphasize what you can do for that organization. Don't be afraid to be enthusiastic. And again, it needs to be polite and not overly formal. So the different sections of your covering letter is the opening. Say which job you're applying for and maybe where you saw it. Why you? Tell them why you're a good candidate. Describe how you match the job spec. Use positive language. Why them? Explain why you're interested in this job and the company. And then in the end, add a closing sentence referencing your CV or your availability. Again, for all of us, if you get a Dear Sir or Madam letter, you're probably not inclined to answer it or take it, view it as that important. But if it's written to Dear Angela or a named person, close it off with yours sincerely. If it's Dear Sir, Madam, you can't find out who to write it to, it's yours faithfully. So the summary with the cover letter, it needs to highlight your key skills and add value.